Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Free Zone. Got Derek here with us tonight. Derek, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I missed the explosion from the last intro at the
Yeah,
end.
that's what I was just thinking.
See, you always laughed. I can see everybody's
I did.
videos, and you
I
always
don't know
laughed. And I
why
was
that
like,
always made me laugh.
"Well," I told Ken, I was like, I can't tell if he hates it or not." So we took it out. But I kind of miss it now that it's gone.
Yeah. No, I liked it. I don't know why it always made me laugh, but it did. You're right.
All three of us would laugh every time it would go on. I'm doing good, man. What's going on in football this week, man?
Well, playoffs start this week, and so one of the things I thought we'd do is take a look at a couple of matchups in each classification. Generally your first round games are kind of mismatches. And so what I've done is I've just gone through each classification and tried to pick out a couple of what I think may be the most even matches and thought we'd kind of talk about some of those tonight a little bit. And then I also want to let people know who's going to be in the state championships in volleyball this weekend and where they can go watch some volleyball and cross country if they decide they want to do that Saturday. So those are just a couple of the things I thought we'd talk about. Awesome. I read a letter by a volleyball coach this weekend, and I didn't realize that the state had cut back the number of teams that qualify for the state meet to 4 teams, or the state tournament in volleyball to 4 teams instead of 8 teams. And she had written a letter that was kind of, being critical of the State Activities Association because of that. And she had some real good points to make. Her name was Nancy Dorsey. She's the volleyball coach at St. James Academy in Lenexa. She had some real good points to make as far as the way the state treats volleyball. The problem was she didn't leave it at that. She had to start trying to compare it to football, and unfortunately, she doesn't have a clue how things work in football. So one thing that I would like to point out about football, she was thinking strictly of 5A, which is the classification that St. James Academy is in. And in 4, 5, and 6A, everybody makes the playoffs in football. But one thing I would like to point out is that football is the only sport that I can think of that Keisha has where not everyone makes the postseason. Okay? In 2A, 3A, in 8-man 1, in 8-man 2, and even in 1A when they have enough teams in it, which they don't this year, only 2/3 of the teams make the playoffs, make postseason play. Okay. In every other sport that I can think of, everyone makes postseason play. Okay. And that was the point where she was kind of killing herself. For instance, in volleyball, every team in the state goes to a sub-state tournament. That's postseason play. In basketball, every team in the state goes to a sub-state tournament. Or well, I think it's still sub-state now that they've split 1A into 2 divisions. Back when 1A was 1 division, they first had like a district tournament and then had a sub-state tournament. But everybody goes to some sort of a postseason tournament, regional wrestling, regional track, regional cross country, regional golf. Every sport has a postseason that every school in the state makes except for football. Football is the only sport where not everyone makes the postseason. Now, granted, 4, 5, and 6A, we've changed it so everyone does make the postseason. I personally don't think that's a good change. I personally wish that we still had districts in 4, 5, and 6A. I think, number one, it does set it up where not everyone makes the postseason, but number two, what to me is more important, districts do 2 things for you. Number one, they make it easier for you to fill a schedule. Okay, some teams, if you're in the Wichita area, you're in the Kansas City area, you're generally not going to have any trouble filling your schedule. If you're Dodge City, Garden City, Liberal, Hayes, Great Bend, especially Dodge City, Garden City, and Liberal, you're going to have a little trouble filling your schedule. You're going to need help from other leagues filling your schedule. Back when we had district games, those district games filled the schedule. And the other thing is that those district games, once you were in district, every game mattered. And some people would argue that now, because of the seeding, every game, the whole season matters. But you're making the playoffs. If you lose a game or 2 on the way, it's not a big deal. And so to me, and we're talking here personal preference. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm saying I prefer the district system, and I understand why some people don't, why some people prefer the system we have now.
Are you educated on why there was a change?
It was the idea of it actually came out of the Greater Wichita Athletic League, so the Wichita City League. I think, honestly, the idea was, I honestly believe that that way everybody gets a chance to experience, that the playoff type atmosphere. And like I said, I don't know that it's a bad idea. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying I preferred the old district system. Like I said, they didn't have to worry about filling schedules. And so what they did was they immediately said to the WAC, Liberal, Dodge City, Garden City, Great Bend, Hayes, we'll help you fill your schedule. And so now, I mean, we still have our schedule fill every year, but it's filled with Wichita schools. To me, it was better, luck of the draw. Sometimes, you'd have to travel to Arc City or, even further than that occasionally. But, I don't know. It's really not a huge difference to me. It's really not. I just preferred the old district system, probably because I'm an old fart and I like the way things always were,
Did she have any points that you agreed with as far as like it being kind of a bad deal for them having to not have as many teams going?
Yeah, I felt like she made some legitimate arguments as far as supporting girls athletics. I didn't have a problem with anything she said as far as talking about the state volleyball tournament and all that. And she made some real valid points. I just wish she had just stayed with talking about volleyball and not started trying to talk about football. To me, you always need to build up your own sport. There's no reason to start attacking somebody else's sport, know. And if you do, you better know what you're talking about, which to me she didn't necessarily. But it's not like it's not like she was really running football down or anything like that. She was just pointing out that the state doesn't always necessarily treat girls athletics and men's athletics the same way, and she's got a point on that. She really does. Now, one thing I would like to point out, though, in fairness to the state, there were still 8 teams that broke out of each sub-state, okay, just like there always have been. But instead of having all 8 of those teams go straight to the state tournament, they played yesterday quarterfinal games at the higher seeded team's home court. And then the winners of those four quarterfinal games in each classification go on to the state tournament. And I get her point that, now we've only got half as many teams at the state tournament, but, and I understand her point, and it's a completely valid point. I had no problem at all with the point she was making there. She's right. And, women's sports do sometimes get treated as kind of a second class citizens, unfortunately. To be honest with you, though, a lot of what she was talking about too was media coverage of sports. Yeah. And the truth is, she's right. Football does get covered more than anything else, but high school sports in general don't get nearly as much coverage in Kansas as they do in a lot of other states, Yeah. And so, I think, there are always things to complain about, Yeah. And then that doesn't make it illegitimate for you to complain about them. That's fine. If you've got a beef, express that, but one thing I would say is there are no perfect systems out there. If there were, we'd already be doing it that way.
To gauge her anger, is this like a COVID change, or is this like from now on they're going to get half as many players?
Now, according to the state, it's a COVID change. It's to cut down on the number of people at the state tournaments. Okay. She's afraid, I think, reading between the lines, I think she's afraid that it might become a permanent change. Yeah. And that one of the reasons is that the state's looking to move the state volleyball tournament back to 1 day instead of 2 days. And, that could be, I don't know. One thing about it, and she points out, they're not really cutting down on the number of people at each state tournament because they've doubled the state tournaments up. And that's one of the things, like, for instance, 5A and 6A are both being played in Salina at the same place. So, I mean, you've cut down on the number of locations. Now there are only 4 venues, but in each venue, you haven't really cut down on the number of people there because you've got both 5A and 6A there in Salina. You've got both 3A and 4A in Hutch. You've got both 1A D1 and 2A in Dodge. The only venue where there's really going to be a reduction in the number of people there is the 1A D2, which is by itself at Emporia. You know, so she has a legitimate point there too. But and while we're on that subject, let me kind of quickly run down who's in the state volleyball tournament. By the way, not all of them have been determined because a couple of the quarterfinal games yesterday got postponed till today because of weather. So in 6A, the number 1 seed is Olathe Northwest. They're 27-0. The number 2 seed is Washburn Rural. They are 32-4. The number 3 seed is Blue Valley West at 22-7. And the number 4 seed is Garden City at 20-13.
How many games do they play in a day?
They'll end up playing 5 games.
That's normal?
No, that's a lot of games. Not normal.
Well,
that's a lot of games.
32 games in the same amount of time it took you guys to play 7.
Okay, so in a lot of what they play is tournaments. And I think in a normal tournament, it's not unusual for them to play 3 or 4 or 5 games. But they're going to play 5 games at the state tournament in that they're going to play a round robin first, and then they'll break into a 4-team bracket after playing a round robin. So they'll end up playing 5 games at the state tournament Saturday. And I think they sometimes do that at some of the tournaments, although I would guess that 3 or 4 games is closer to the average at their tournaments in one day.
Can you imagine just playing 2 football games in one day?
Yeah, no. I can't. Playing ridiculous, you know.
Yeah, you got to give it to them for that. Like they played 32 games in the last 7-8 weeks. That's crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, also at Salina is 5A, where you've got number 1 seed Lansing at 26-1, number 2 seed Bishop Carroll at 25-2, number 3 seed St. Thomas Aquinas at 24-2, and number 4 seed Maize South at 29-6. 3A and 4A are in Hutchinson. In 4A, you've got number 1 seed Andale, 34-2. Number 2 seed McPherson, 33-3. Number 3 seed Ottawa, 23-13. And number 4 seed Bishop Miege at 17-11. In 2A, it has been seeded. All their games are complete. Hillsboro's the number 1 seed at 27-3. Smith Center, number 2 at 33-6. Notice you're going to hear a lot of the same schools in both football and volleyball. Number 3, Heritage Christian at 23-8, and number 4, Wabunsie at 27-10. 1A D1, they're not seeded again because one of the games hasn't taken place, but St. John Hudson will be at the state tournament. Central Plains Wilson will be at the state tournament. Lebo will be at the state tournament, and the winner of tonight's Skyline Rosalia Flint Hills game. And in 1A D2, which takes place at Emporia, we've got Wheatland Grinnell, Hanover. Tonight, the winner of Attica versus Otis Bison will be in, and the winner of Hutch Central Christian versus Moran Marmonton Valley will be in. So we've got 2 or 3 games. Well, it looks like 4 games happening tonight that'll still determine who makes it to the state tournament Saturday. So here we are Wednesday evening, and we're still trying to determine who's going to be in the state tournament Saturday. So that's kind of exciting.
Do you have a lot of students that scholarship up with volleyball as much as you do with football and baseball and stuff?
All right. Yes and no. Okay. Obviously, football is the biggest when it comes to scholarships because because you have 85 scholarship positions on a football team. And I'm not sure of the current rules in junior colleges, but it used to be they would split those scholarships up and give partial scholarships instead of full scholarships. And so like they might have had 85 full scholarships. By the time they split it up, they can have, 170 kids on, if they split them all up, which they didn't. But if they did, they could theoretically have 170 kids on scholarship. So the rules are different at different levels, but usually it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 85 players that you have on scholarship. So football has almost as many scholarship players as, any 8 or 10 other sports. So volleyball, I don't know their total number of scholarships, but you have 6 players on the court at once, right? And I don't know what their scholarship limits are. My guess is you probably have 12 scholarship players. I don't know that, but that's my guess.
Mm-hmm.
In baseball, you've got 11 players on the field at once. No, 9 players on the sorry, I'm thinking of football. You got 9 players on the field at once, right?
And I'm doing it over there now.
Yeah, and I think you've got, that's why they're winning. I think you've got like 15 or 16 scholarships. So each sport has its own number of scholarships. Each sport has its own scholarship limit. Mm-hmm. Football is the big one, though, right? It's the one that has the most scholarships.
And because you can, because like you don't even have to break it down to high school talk. Like you look at the bank account for the NBA, and then you look at the bank account for the WNBA. Like obviously there is right. Is that kind of the same in high school sports too? Like just football is like, it's more of a pastime. People go out, they fill the stands and stuff. It's just that's where we're getting the most revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it varies from school to school, obviously. But when I first came to Liberal back in 2001, every sport basically got the gate money that they generated. That was their budget for the year. Okay, so your 2002 budget was your gate money from 2001. Okay, and football basically then pulled enough of a gate in to subsidize all the other sports. A lot of their budget actually was borrowed from football because football brought in a lot more gate money. Now Liberal was kind of unique in the way they did that. Most schools even that out. All the gate money goes into the athletic budget and then it's redistributed from there. But in colleges where you really see the difference. At most colleges, the only revenue generating sport is football. Mm-hmm. All the other sports cost you money. In some schools, that's obviously different. Like at KU, I'll guarantee you the basketball team generates more revenue than the football team. Mm. Okay. But if you look at the revenue, that's the reason why college football, unlike the rest of the college sports, is kind of autonomous, is because they have the financial clout to be autonomous. The NCAA could cancel sports, and did cancel sports like, track and baseball and yada, 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 right? But they couldn't do that with football because in football, the NCAA isn't responsible for negotiating the television contracts. Some schools negotiate their television contracts by themselves, Notre Dame. Some schools, the conferences negotiate the television contracts. That's most of them. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so football is completely different. That's why football is autonomous, is because of the television money it brings in and the fact that it has enough financial clout to keep itself autonomous.
Yeah.
And so, there's no doubt that men's sports get treated differently from women's sports because they draw more spectators and they generate more revenue. Okay. And fair or unfair, you can debate that, but the truth is that is the reality of it.
And you could have very well told me that football players get scholarships and everybody else has a nice time playing sports in high school. But I mean, it sounds like, obviously you have more players on a football field, but it sounds like if you want to get an education and you have somewhat of a skill in a sport, it sounds like, in high school, most high schools, like there's at least a shot you could, get some type of scholarship, partial scholarship, books and tuition, something like that. I went to school in Garden City because I knew how to play the bass drum, which all you have to do is know how to count to 4.
Mhm.
So like that was a big thing for me, like that was, like that. I think the scholarship thing is really great. But I think, yeah, like the football makes most of the money. And in a lot of schools, like you said, they're kind of carrying the budget for everybody. So I don't know. To guess close what she was talking about. Like I do see there's obviously
there is a double standard.
Yeah.
I wouldn't try to pretend that there isn't. There absolutely is a double standard. What I'm saying is, some of it you can change and some of it you can't. You know what I'm saying? You can't make everybody care about volleyball. Okay. So, and right now football's really popular as a spectator sport, whether it's high school, college, professional football. Obviously pro football is more popular than any of them, but they're all have varying degrees of popularity, and that's the problem. I mean, we didn't have to make people like football, or if we did it a long time ago before I knew anything about it, so some sports are going to get treated as second-class citizens because they don't draw a lot of people, so they don't draw a lot of attention. Track's a good example. There was a time when track was one of the leading sports in this country. Well, it's not anymore. It just doesn't generate the excitement that some other sports do, and people have moved on to other sports. There was a time when the two biggest sports in this country on television were boxing and horse racing. Well, those days are long gone. Things evolve, and someday football may not be king, but right now it is.
Most sports. I mean, you think about it. People watch the Olympics all day long, but they don't watch any of that for 3 years before the Olympics. They don't watch all those matches these people did.
Yeah.
Nobody follows like any of these people, but when the Olympics happen. So yeah, it is what it is. Like there's some sports put butts in seats, and therefore they get a little bit of a grace period.
Yeah, well, they definitely get more attention and, definitely draw in more income, but still, I want people to understand that the vast majority of college sports cost the university money.
Mm-hmm.
They don't make the university money. Football is a revenue generating sport for most schools, not for all schools, but for most schools. Basketball is a revenue generating sport for many schools, but probably not most. And then after that, for most schools, there aren't any more revenue generating sports. I mean, you have your odd school here or there that, this is their thing, but for most schools, those are your only two revenue generating sports, are football and generally men's basketball, not just basketball, but men's basketball. And, however, there are probably exceptions. It wouldn't surprise me.
When you had the liberal cheerleaders on, cheerleading was started by men. Women didn't even do it until like 60 years later. Exactly. And now I really rarely see a lot of men in that, so who knows what sport's going to be popular 30 years from now.
Yeah. Things are going to evolve. That's for sure. But, it also wouldn't surprise me if some places like, UConn and the women's team that they've had there, it wouldn't surprise me if their women's team is a revenue generating team, Tennessee back in the days when their women's program was really dominant,
I think even when Jamie Talbot played in Seward, people were driving over there to watch her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because of all the buzz.
Yeah, absolutely. Seward County always had one of the best women's teams in the nation at that time, But yeah, I mean, right now, women's professional sports struggle to generate revenue. Most of them are supported, subsidized. The WNBA is subsidized by the NBA and so on. There are some women's professional sports that are definitely revenue generating. It's one of those things that I'd have to research a little bit. I'm pretty sure figure skating is still pretty popular and probably generates some revenue. I'm sure there are others too, but off the top of my head, I don't know. But women's professional team sports, for the most part, kind of struggle to generate revenue. But it's not just them either. I mean, Major League Soccer. I mean, I'm sure nobody's going broke doing it, but how many of those teams are really generating a ton of revenue?
Yeah.
I don't know, but my guess would be that most of them aren't generating a ton.
Yeah.
And so on. So, we have our I don't know, I guess our big three in baseball, basketball, and football. There was a time when NASCAR was right up there, making as much money and gathering as many viewers as those. I don't know that time's still here, but so things are still evolving, the popularity of different sports, but yeah, it's, for the most part, women's sports have struggled to find an audience,
Mm-hmm.
And that's just, it doesn't mean that women's sports aren't good. It doesn't mean that they're not worth watching. Doesn't mean that the women don't work every bit as hard as the men. They absolutely do, and that's why one of the things that I try to do here by talking about, state volleyball and some of these, is I'm try to encourage people to get out and watch those sports as much as possible. To me, the schools, in most communities, your school is the heart of your community. And so everything you can do to support those kids is worthwhile. Okay. Mm-hmm. It helps your community, and I'm not just talking about sports either. Go to a band concert, go down and see the play, the musical, go to a quiz bowl, go to a debate tournament, a forensics tournament. Go support your programs, your men's programs, your women's programs, your sports, your non-sports. Get out there and support what the kids are doing, because they support your community, and by supporting them, you are supporting the community as well. And that's just, obviously that's not something you can make people do, but it's something that I try to encourage people to do.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, cross country, state cross country takes place this weekend also. And here are the venues for state cross country. 5A and 6A are in Augusta at 4 Mile Creek Resort. You can check the Acacia website if you want to see times, and there are directions for how to get there and that kind of thing. 4A and 3A are at Wamego Country Club. 2A and 1A are in Victoria at the Sand Plum Nature Trail, which just sounds like a lovely place. Mm-hmm. So get out there this weekend and take in some volleyball, or get out there this weekend and watch some cross country.
How many miles do they run generally at a meet?
They run 5K, and what is that, like 3.2 miles, something like that? Yeah. So yeah, they run a 5K in cross country. And those, you want to talk about hardworking athletes. Those cross country runners are hardworking athletes. They really are. And they're not for the most part the most explosive athletes out there. It takes a different.
I feel like it's a hard. Like, I didn't go out for it, like football, like, oh, you got to have pads, basketball. Yeah. It's like, well, what's cross country? Oh, you just run as far as you can until you get really tired. It's like, I don't know, man. Like, is there a ball? No, there's no ball. You just literally just run that way until we tell you to quit.
Yeah, it's a hard sell to bigger guys like you and me, Derek. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I had friends that did well in cross country. Uh-huh. And like, anytime I see anybody run 3 miles and not die, I'm impressed. Just like, especially being 37 years old. So like, I think that stuff. I had a buddy. We were in a band together, and he would jog like 5 miles to where we would practice, and he would play a full set. And I'm just like, you're crazy, man. But
yeah, that's for sure. I think Sarah was a cross country runner in high school.
Yeah,
if I remember right. I'm pretty sure she was out for track. I was the track coach back in those days. Let's see. Hey, let's get to football. And let's take a look at some of the key matchups in each classification. We're going to start in 8-man. In 8-man Division II. Now, something I need to explain, and I think I may have said this earlier. In the first round, there are a lot of mismatches, right? Because you've got the number in 4, 5, and 6A, you've got the number 1 seed against the number 16 seed, and so on. We all know how seeding works, right? So you get a lot of mismatches in the first round. In the divisions, in the small school division where they have districts, you get the first place team from one district against the fourth place team from another district, the second against the third, and so on, okay? And so you get a lot of mismatches in the first round. So what I've done is just tried to pick out a couple of what I think could be good matchups in each classification. So in 8-man 2, we've got 5-3 Buckland is, I believe, hosting 5-3 Tri-Plains Brewster. There's one that I think could be a good, if you're looking for an 8-man game to go watch Thursday night. The 8-man teams are playing tomorrow, by the way. 8-man 1 and 8-man 2 are both playing tomorrow. So if you're looking for an 8-man game to go to tomorrow and you're in the Buckland area, I believe Buckland is hosting that game. You've got 5-3 Buckland versus 5-3 Tri-Plains Brewster. Now, Tri-Plains and Brewster is a consolidated football team. Tri-Plains is Winona Tri-Plains, and Brewster is another little school on to the west of there. And so Tri-Plains and Brewster are playing together. They've played some common opponents, pretty similar scores against those common opponents, so I think that could be a real good matchup. Also in 8-man Division II, we've got 5-1 Central Plains, that's Claflin, versus 5-3 Peabody Burns. So both have similar win totals, but obviously Central Plains has played less games. Excuse me just a second here. Oh, sorry about that, everyone. So we've got 5-1 Central Plains versus
microphone.
Oh, yeah, thanks. We've got 5-1 Central Plains versus 5-3 Peabody Burns. They do not have any common opponents, I don't think. But I do think that that's one that hopefully could be a good matchup there. And hey, while we're on the subject, I skipped over it. 6-man plays their state championship game Saturday. And that state championship game is 6-1 Moscow versus 8-0 Cheyenne. If you don't know where Cheyenne is, that's Bird City. That's up in the northwest corner. It's called Cheyenne because the school district is partially in Cheyenne County and partially in Lincoln County. So that's why it's called Cheyenne. Okay?
Tell me they travel in a van.
Well, they might. They could. Might take 2 vans by the time you get coaches and a couple of managers in there. By the way, if you remember Dina Johnson, I think she may have gone to school at Cheyenne.
Okay.
I think that might be where she went to high school. I may be wrong, but she's up somewhere in that area anyway. If not awesome. Cheyenne, it was one of the schools close to there. All right, let's take a look at 8-man Division I. In 8-man Division I, one matchup that I've been looking at that I think could be a really good matchup is 6-1 Hoxie versus 5-3 Spearville. Spearville started off 4-0 and then lost 3 straight, but they lost to Leota, who is undefeated, South Gray, whose only losses to Leota, and Hodgman County, whose only losses are to South Gray and Leota. So they've lost 3. They lost 3 in a row there at one point, but they lost to really good teams. 6-1 Hoxie, their only loss is to Leota, and that was week 1. So they've won 6 straight. So that one could be a very good matchup there in 8-man Division I tomorrow evening. And also you've got 4-3 Lacrosse hosting 4-4 Mound Ridge. It's Lacrosse's first year playing 8-man this year. They dropped down from 11-man. And, they've been pretty good. Mound Ridge, 4-4. Mound Ridge also was playing 11-man just not very long ago. I think it may have been 3 years ago that they dropped down. So Mound Ridge is also a recent arrival in 8-man, and I think Lacrosse Mound Ridge could be a real good game there. All right, in 1A, now this is 11-man action. It was kind of tough to find ones that weren't real lopsided. And so I really kind of fell in with a couple of local teams. If you're in the Elkhart area, believe it or not, 2-5 Elkhart is hosting a playoff game.
Wow.
And Elkhart, 2-5 Elkhart hosts 3-5 El Saline Friday night. So that could be a pretty good game. Elkhart's 2 wins are over Sublette and Stanton County. El Saline has wins over Ellenwood, Marion, and Sacred Heart. Together, the 2 teams that Elkhart has beaten have a combined 1 win. The 3 teams that El Saline has beaten have a combined 2 wins, I believe. Okay. So neither one of them have beaten.
Rough going this year.
Yeah. Elkhart. Right. Neither one of them have beaten a bunch of real good teams by any means, but I hopefully that'll be a good matchup. I think El Saline's probably a little stronger team, but we'll see. I'd like to see Elkhart give them a game and beat them. Another one too is, and this one is at Plainville, I believe. You've got 4-4 Plainville versus 1-4 Sublette. In 1A, we've really got a lot of mismatches in the first round, so this one may even be a little bit of one. But Plainville has close losses to Oakley, Smith Center, and TMP. Those are 3 pretty good teams. So Plainville is at 4-4 is probably a pretty darn good team. Sublette has kind of struggled this year. Their only win is over Stanton County. So this one may be a little bit of a mismatch too. I think Plainville's definitely a better team. But if nothing else, it would be a good game to watch to see whether Plainville is better than their 4-4 record. All right, in 2A. And this one should be legitimately a pretty good matchup. We've got 4-4 Lakin versus 4-4 Phillipsburg. And that game is at Lakin. Now, Phillipsburg plays in that Mid-Continent League, so you can bet that their 4 losses are probably to the same people that Plainsville lost to. They've probably lost to Oakley, Smith Center, TMP, schools like that. Maybe Norton in there too. I don't know. Lakin has also lost 4 games. Lakin lost to TMP in district. Lakin lost to Stratford, Texas, Cimarron, and Holcomb. So Lakin has lost 4 games, but they've lost to 4 really good teams too. Yeah. And a couple of those were real close games. So I think 4-4 Lakin versus 4-4 Phillipsburg could be a good matchup. That game will be played in Lakin tomorrow evening. And a game in Cimarron tomorrow evening. You've got 5-3 Cimarron versus 4-4 Minneapolis. Now, Cimarron's 3 losses are to Scott City, Holcomb, and Colby, I believe. So they've lost to 3 pretty good teams too. All the teams they've lost to are in the playoffs as well. All right, in 3A, to me, the best matchup in 3A, hopefully, is 7-1 Holcomb versus 6-2 Clearwater. I've got a couple of friends one friend that coaches at Clearwater. I'd like to see them give Holcomb a good game. I don't get me wrong, I'd like to see Holcomb advance because they're from out here, but I hope that's a good game, and I think it could be. We've also got 3-4 Marysville. Now, they've only won 3 games this year, but Marysville has a tradition of being a pretty good team. And 3-4 Marysville will be playing at 6-2 Colby. And so Colby's hosting a playoff game as well. And I think Colby's a pretty strong team, although Colby has been a little up and down this season. And let's face it, this is a weird year. You don't know whether they've been up and down because they have trouble getting it together sometimes, or if they've been up and down because they're missing players because of COVID at times. You never know that with most teams this year unless you really, dig in and do some research. So I'm not sure why Colby has been up and down this year, but they certainly have been up and down a little bit. All right, in 4A, I think this one could be a pretty good matchup. We've got 3-5 Augusta versus 3-5 Ulysses. Now, that game, I believe, is in Augusta, so it's going to be a drive if you're going to it. But I think Augusta-Ulysses could be a heck of a matchup. Ulysses has played a pretty tough schedule. Their 3 wins came against Liberal, Borger, Texas, Oh, I don't remember who that third win was against. I should have written it down. Anyway, they've played a tough schedule. Of course, their losses are to teams like Holcomb, Scott City, Cimarron. I believe they lost to Hugoton as well. Hugoton didn't make the playoffs, but Hugoton played really tough at times this year. Another pretty intriguing matchup from 4A to me is the defending state champion Bishop Miege finished the season 2-4. Now, their 4 losses are to Rockhurst, which is one of the best teams in the state of Missouri, in Kansas City there. Bishop Carroll, which is one of the top teams in 5A. Mill Valley, which is the defending state champion in 5A. And St. Thomas Aquinas, which again is one of the best teams in the state in 5A. So Bishop Miege is 2-4, but they have played a killer schedule. And those games, for the most part, were close. The game against Carroll wasn't particularly close, but the other 3 games were close. Well, I take that back. The game against Rockhurst wasn't particularly close either, but they played Aquinas tough and they played Mill Valley tough. And so, I think Bishop Miege obviously is much better than their 2-4 record would indicate. They've got 3-3 Chanute in the first round, and that game is at Chanute. And that takes care of 4A. So that brings us to 5A. In 5A, I like this game because it's a rematch of a game from 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, Maize South beat Hayes 21-20. Hayes had several students out with COVID-19. They were or injuries. I think both were a factor. They were down to their third string quarterback. Maize beat them 21-20, and now they've got to turn around and play Maize in the first round of the playoffs. So you've got 5-2 Hayes versus 4-3 Maize South. Okay. By the way, Maize South lost by 1 to Hutchinson. They lost by 4 to Maize High. And, of course, like we said, they beat Hayes 21-20. So Maize South has 3 losses, but 2 of those losses are by a combined 5 points to the top 2 seeds. No, the number 2 and number 3 seed in the West bracket of 5A. So they've lost to good teams. All right, also in 5A, we've got 4-2 Wichita Heights versus 5-3 Andover. Andover upset Goddard last week, and that also totally changed the seeding in 5A. Goddard was the number 2 seed in 5A, and they fell clear to the 5 seed, I believe, after losing to Andover. So a couple of good teams there in 5A, Wichita Heights and Andover. I believe Heights is hosting that game. All right, in 6A, we've got Topeka High versus Dodge City. Topeka High is 2-3. Dodge City is 3-5. Dodge City's got they've got a pretty good shot at advancing here. I think Dodge City can play with Topeka High, and obviously can play with them and can beat them. As a matter of fact, if I had to pick one of these 2 teams, that's who I'd pick. And so Dodge City's got a great chance to advance in the playoffs here, even though they've only got a 3-5 record. The other key matchup to me in 6A is 5-3 Manhattan versus 3-5 Garden City. They've already played once this year. As a matter of fact, first game of the year, Manhattan beat Garden City 21-7. So in a lot of ways, most people would probably expect Manhattan to have the upper hand here. But one thing that I have found in football is it's tough to beat a team twice sometimes. Okay, and so I'm kind of hoping that Garden City, they learned something from the first time they played Manhattan, and that they'll come back and beat Manhattan in this matchup. It would be nice to see those WAC teams advancing in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Okay, and so those are our matchups basically in 1A through 6A, or 8-man 2 through 6A. I think any of those games could hopefully be good games. Again, it's sometimes hard to find good games in the first round. You get a lot of mismatches in the first round. We'll start to see some closer matchups in the second and third rounds of the playoffs.
There's nothing that happens after state champ, right? Like they don't ever try to put two high schools from different states against each other and see what happens.
Not in Kansas, no. In some states, they don't. Nobody goes on to like another tournament beyond the state championship, but in some states, especially back east, they after the playoffs and sometimes even after the state championships, some of those schools still have some kind of a big rivalry game against an out-of-state team that they'll play.
Okay.
And some of those are old, those are games that have been being played for 100 years, some of them. And so you see that sometimes back east. For the most part, the only thing you're going to see after the state championship games, and it happens more in the summer, is you'll see like your Shrine Bowl games and your All-Star games of various kinds. There's a bunch of those All-Star games that take place in the spring and summer. And so that's really it. As a team, generally, after the state playoffs, that's it. The season is over. Yeah, it's not. And that's true in most sports, anything you do beyond that is kind of, it's more clubs and things like that. It's not school teams that go on past that.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I think it's going to be a great weekend of football, and here we are, we've made it to the playoffs. 9 weeks ago, I think that a lot of us were not real sure whether we would get to the playoffs or not. I know a lot of coaches who were convinced that we would probably never make it to the playoffs. And here we have made it to the playoffs. There have been some hiccups along the way. There have been games canceled. There have been students quarantined and so on and so on. Thankfully, we have not seen, to the best of my knowledge, we've not seen any high school football players in the state of Kansas that have been seriously ill with COVID-19. We certainly have had some that have had it, but to the best of my knowledge, we've not had any that have been seriously ill with it. I don't know of any adults associated with teams either that have been seriously ill, although it wouldn't surprise me if there have been a couple,
Yeah.
But for the most part, we've been pretty fortunate. And, some of that fortune is by design. I think that, some people did a pretty good job of saying this is what we need to do. And let's face it, some of it has probably been luck too, But the truth is a lot of people weren't sure we'd get through the season, and here we are at the playoffs and we're still playing. And so
I'm a little nervous with the how sports are going to be moving inside now, and the numbers are going up now. So I'm hoping they still get to play. Probably I kind of foresee not having a lot of people watching it, just to be safe. But
yeah, I'm sure you're going to see that. You're going to see, of course, you're seeing it in football, and it's being played outside. And
that's
what a lot of places are capping the crowd at 25% capacity. And I'm sure you're going to have, measures like that with your indoor sports, and when we started talking about playing sports in COVID, the two sports that really popped into my mind as problem sports were football and even more so wrestling.
Yeah.
And I'm not real sure what they're going to do with wrestling. I've seen some models that talk about how you can do it, and it's going to involve after every match, the wrestlers completely wipe down with sanitizer. They change uniforms. They, do everything like that. I don't know. To me, that is awful close contact, Of course, the idea would be that it doesn't occur for more than 10 minutes, and so I don't know, but hopefully they'll find a way for those kids to compete, but we obviously, I talk about this and we want them to compete safely. We don't want people putting their lives at risk. We don't want, but at the same time, I also know, and we've talked repeatedly about this, how important it is for some kids to get a sense of normalcy back in their lives. Mental illness rates or treatment for mental illness has soared during this pandemic. And we're not just talking about among high school kids, and we're not just talking about among athletes, but treatment for mental illness has soared during this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is, I don't know this off the top of my head, but my guess is that suicide rates are probably also up.
Mm-hmm.
And all those things that kind of go hand in hand, And so to me, not playing is in some ways more dangerous than playing.
Yeah.
For some kids, maybe not for every kid, but for some kids, not playing is certainly more dangerous than playing. And so I'm glad that we've been able to play. I'm glad that so far, at least in the state of Kansas, we've been, as far as I know, without any really major incidents or any really major sicknesses. We've had a lot of kids that have gotten sick, but to the best of my knowledge, we haven't had any hospitalizations. And if we have not, to the best of my knowledge, had any serious illnesses of any students. Now, I think we may have had, like I said, a couple of adults that, where we've had hospitalizations and maybe more serious illnesses. And we expect that with this disease. This disease definitely seems to hit older people harder, But like I said, so far, I think we've done pretty well. Hopefully we'll continue to do well. I'm like you, though. The indoor sports scare me a little. The idea of the coming winter and knowing the effect that has on cold and flu season. Is it going to have a similar effect on COVID? Even if it doesn't, if we have a cold and flu season like we've always had in the past, how do we distinguish cold and flu from COVID? Because let's face it, the common cold, the flu, seasonal allergies, and COVID all share pretty similar, symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of those things. Obviously, we're going to have to be vigilant in testing and in doing screenings and things like that. I think we have been so far, and we're going to have to continue to be, and maybe even step it up a little more as we move to indoor sports, because the statistics tell us, that this disease spreads much more easily indoors than it does outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings me to one of those dirty little secrets that epidemiologists don't like to talk about, a word they don't like to throw around. If it spreads more easily indoors than outdoors, that tells me that to a certain extent, this disease has to be airborne. Okay. Now, they don't like to use the term airborne because of past epidemics and pandemics, and also because of the connotation of that word. But obviously, if you're more likely to catch it inside than you are outside, that tells me that inside it's hanging in the air somehow longer, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that doesn't fit the actual definition of airborne, but
yeah. My only thing is I heard that last year, well, when this all started, I heard that we had a pretty mild flu season because of all the masks. And I'm hoping that there's a similar, but because you're right, man.
Masks, because of all the hand washing, because of the social distancing. Yeah.
We're all going to start sniffling in the next 6 weeks, and we're going to be either hopefully just getting better soon, or going to see Jesus, and it's going to be a scary time for everybody, because you're not going to know what you have. But
yeah, and that's and I think you're right in that. I think that the cold and flu season will probably be much milder because of the masks and the hand washing and the social distancing and all that. Those are all things that we probably should have been doing all these years during cold and flu season anyway.
I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I take pills for it, but that's how I lived every day. And because it's weird. Like people don't realize it. They'll go to pump gas and they'll put their hand on a gas thing that people, like probably 50 people have touched in the last 3 hours. And then they'll get in they'll touch their face and stuff. I'm like, bro, you're going to get sick, man. That's how it happens.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. I find myself thinking much more about
Mhm.
where my hands have been these days than, you think a lot more about what you've come in contact with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I mean, that's one thing that, cause like I'm not gonna, I don't know if I'm gonna say wear a mask forever, but I hope that people take this COVID experience and just protect themselves from even like common colds that are only going to be 2 days of unpleasantness, but still, why go through that? Just
Yeah, absolutely.
wash your hands.
Yeah, in a lot of places in the world, if you have a cold or whatever, it's common courtesy to wear a mask to protect the people around you.
Mhm.
And I think that probably that's something that, and obviously I'm not talking about the government telling you you've got to do it. I'm saying common courtesy should probably
Yeah.
dictate to you that you do that. I mean, if you've got a cold, you ought to do what you can to protect other people from catching your cold. If you've got the flu, you ought to do what you can to protect other people from catching it.
Yeah.
And that's what we forget, I think, sometimes still, even though we shouldn't, even though we ought to know this, is that you don't wear the mask to protect yourself as much as you wear it to protect the people around you, from you. And,
from you.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully that's something we'll keep up with.
Yeah. I think it'll keep people getting from getting sick so much during but for right now, if anybody gets caught coughing, everybody's immediately leery of you and then is going to get away from you for the next year or two.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, at the first of the year here I was, they had the screening thing. You were supposed to answer the questions. The first one is, do you have a cough? Well, I've always got a cough. It's a side effect of the blood pressure medication I take, So yeah, I've got a cough. Now, Is it a new cough? No, but yeah.
But if you're in Moores and you got one coming up, I'm sure you try to hold it in and you're like, I can't cough right now. People will freak out. It happens to me. I'll be at the store and I just cough every once in a while because I inhale spit or something. I'm like, oh, I have to cough. I'll try to hold it in because I just don't want to be the guy. I swear I don't have COVID, but.
Yep. Well, guys, hey, thanks for tuning in this week. Go out and watch a playoff game. Go watch an 8-man game tomorrow night. Go catch an 11-man game Friday night. Then go watch some cross country or volleyball this weekend too. If you're within driving distance of those places, go check out high school sports. Support as many teams as you can. It's important. You're supporting your kids, you're supporting your community. So get out there and support those programs as much as possible. Also, while you're at it, support Back Home Media. Back Home Media is the producer of this show. They're the producer of a lot of great podcasts. They offer a lot of other services too. So visit the Back Home Media webpage and see what Back Home Media can do for you. All right, Derek, anything you want to add?
I think that's it. Everybody, thanks for hanging out, and thanks for listening to the podcast. If you're listening to this right now in your car.
Absolutely, guys. And we will be back Saturday for a wrap-up of what happened in the first round of the playoffs. Volleyball and cross country will be going on at that time, so we probably won't have much. We might have a few finals for you from those as well Saturday, but definitely Saturday we'll take a look at what happened in the first round of the playoffs, and then next Wednesday we'll kind of go from there. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you again Saturday.
See you later.
Well,
I don't think and I thought it, that's different. I don't think and I thought it, that's different. I said what I said and I meant it, or lamented. Words given weight without thought in a person, the way that I talk and the way that I ought to be able to pause and to say that the fault can be placed on my arms. To this playful assault, to disgrace in his arm. Pray for the day they could wait for the calm. You can't control the storm, only weather it, whether it's 5 weeks and 5 days of rain sideways, or scorched earth, search for death or water, left with all the thorns, with the petals gone, settle on the breath of autumn. If the ground fits, wear it, the crown fits. If the crown fits,